Digitising our local heritage, Europeana in focus. My name is Joanne Rothwell. I'm the Waterford City and County Archivist, and I'm here to just try and keep everything together this morning. So before we start, my first little piece of housekeeping is to let you all know that this morning's event is being recorded, and the Waterford Libraries will be sharing it later on. And the next thing is to let you know that our three speakers will be speaking first, and then we'll be taking a look at any questions that you have. So as they're talking, if you do have questions, if you pop them into the Q&A, which is at the bottom of your screen, and then the speaker can take a look at them at the end of the talks. So what are the talks? The talks this morning are Digitising Our Local Heritage, Europeana in Focus. This is an event that has been organised by Waterford Libraries, Direct Waterford in partnership with Waterford Archives, with the Digital Repository of Ireland, and with, of course, Europeana. Direct Waterford is actually an information centre, and the role of Waterford, Europe Direct in Waterford is to act as a central point of information that connects people in the southeast directly with EU institutions, and works with local organisations and local people to connect them with projects and to connect them with resources across Europe. And Europeana is the perfect project in relation to that, because Europeana is there to create connections between archives, museums, galleries, all sorts of heritage and cultural objects, and ensure that researchers can access an enormous range of resources across Europe. And it also is an opportunity for organisations in local areas to contribute to research by making available their material, their digitised material, on the Europeana portal. And what that does is that it ensures that not only can people get access to material they might not otherwise get access to, but also it allows people to create connections that they might not otherwise see. To explain a lot more about what Europeana is about, our first speaker will be Adrian Murphy, and Adrian is in charge of collection engagement with Europeana. He has been with Europeana for 5 years, and if anybody has taken a look at the Europeana.eu Facebook page, you'll see some wonderful galleries on different subjects and themes, and that is part of the work that Adrian does. So he is the best person to tell us a lot more about Europeana and some of the amazing resources that are available on Europeana. So without further ado, I will pass you on to Adrian, who would introduce you to all the wonderful resources that Europeana holds.
Thanks, Joanne. Okay, let me share my screen so I can show you my presentation. I hope that's working okay now. Thank you very much for inviting me and Kathryn and Killian to speak today. And I'm really excited to introduce Europeana to all of you. So I start with this picture, which is actually local heritage for Waterford, something called St. Declan's Stone in Ardmore, but actually not part of any Waterford local archives. But this is actually from the Wellcome Collection, which is a museum in the UK, in London. So an idea that local connections can actually be international as well. So moving forward, today what I hope to do is to introduce you to Europeana and how to use the Europeana website and get involved, and hopefully inspire some new ideas and collaboration. So maybe the first question is, what is Europeana? It's a platform for digitized cultural heritage collections. It's an initiative of the European Union. On the Europeana website, the millions of digital objects from 3,500 plus galleries, libraries, archives, and museums all across Europe are published. The Europeana website is http europeana.eu, and there's also a suite of APIs where you can also access this information. If you don't know what an API is, don't worry, we won't talk too much about those today. As an organization, Europeana supports the cultural heritage sector with its digital transformation. I won't touch too much on that today, but if you have any questions particularly about that, you can ask those in the chat and I can talk about that. So the European initiative is actually made up of three separate organizations or connected organizations, a bit like a shamrock in a way. So there is the Europeana Foundation, which is the organization I work for. That was established in 2008. We have about 60 staff from 20 different nationalities. We're based in the Royal Library of the Netherlands in The Hague, although none of us have actually been there for a long time. And I'm currently living in Amsterdam. We also have the Europeana Network Association, which is a community of around 2,000 plus heritage professionals all across Europe, which I think Killian will talk a bit more about later, and the Europeana Aggregators Forum, which help us bring this content into Europeana. And Kathryn will touch more on those later. So the 3,500 cultural heritage organizations whose collections we publish and display are libraries, museums, archives, organizations called aggregators, NGOs and private companies all across Europe. We do this through a kind of a technical infrastructure. Europeana as an organization doesn't have a one-to-one relationship with every one of those 3,500 organizations. That would be quite hard. So we do this in this, and apologies for this rather scrappy looking diagram, through organizations called aggregators. And so in Ireland, the Digital Repository of Ireland is the national aggregator for Ireland. They have a technical network and the actual relationship with organizations all across Ireland to bring that content together and then into Europeana. There's national aggregators in many different countries, not everyone, but in, for example, Sweden and Spain, as in this diagram. And then there are also some aggregators that are on topics like fashion and photography, and a few that are on sort of themes like archives and museums. So the Europeana website is available has an interface in 26 different languages, all the EU languages, Tosche Oskelga Freschen, and the metadata that you can find on there is available on 35 plus languages. So every organization that has its content and collections displayed on Europeana has that data mostly in their own languages. Some also translate that into English as well. We have started a project or soon start a project to see if we can automatically translate that into any number of different languages. And on the site, you'll find images, text, 3D, sound, and video, everything that you think would come under the sort of label of culture. The idea behind the site is to display authentic catalogue information from the source. So whatever the museum or gallery library wants to share is the information that you see on Europeana. There's clear attribution to whoever the creator or the rights holder of that information is. On every single page of Europeana, there's a visible license or rights statement to say whether this material is available for reuse or other purposes. And there's a direct link to the object on the museum, gallery, library's own website back to that site. Because there are something in the region of 58 million records on Europeana, we know that no one person is ever going to look at all of those or ever going to see all of those at any one time. So we've brought together different collections under different topics. So these are kind of curated searches to help our audiences find the most relevant material and bring together also the editorial that we publish as well. So these are on topics like the First World War, art, industrial heritage, migration, maps and geography. There's about 15 to 20, I'm not exactly sure the total number right now, different topics, and that helps you find material a lot faster. We also have other pages on the site that bring together the editorial that we publish on different topics. So, for example, on women's history, on architecture, on environmental issues, and so on. So most people will use the Europeana website to search and look for information. The search, it works as a keyword search, and there's also a page on the site that explains a lot more information how to sort of narrow down those searches using search tips, such as, for example, Boolean search and a number of other different ways of doing that. I won't go into all of those just now, though. When you do a search, you can then filter that the results under the collection, as I mentioned. So, for example, if you were searching for a hospital, but you wanted a World War I hospital, you could use the collection filter to search to World War I. You can filter by the type of media, so whether it's an image or an audio or video or 3D, etc. Can you use it? I'll talk about that in just a moment. You could search by the providing country. So, for example, if you were looking for a picture of a shop, let's say, but you wanted it to be a shop from Slovakia, then you could do that. And there are some other filters as well. You can even search by color. Doesn't always work that well because computers can't read colors that well, but there are more filters that allow you to drill down the results into to find exactly what you're looking for. So as I mentioned, every page on the Europeana site has a visible right statement or license to show if you can use it. And we use 14 different types here. The Creative Commons licenses are applied most often, but there are also some other examples used as well. And you can also search, when you have searched, you can also filter by whether you can use this item. So here we say yes means that it's in the public domain or it's been licensed so that it can be reused for any type of purpose. Yes with conditions mean that you might have to attribute for that, or it might be for non-commercial purposes perhaps. And maybe is generally kind of no, but we say maybe because you might need to get copyright permission from the original holder of that item. An important part and the work that I do most is working on the editorial for Europeana. So we don't want to just have a sort of database site where we show these 58 million records, but we also want to try and tell the stories of those collections and make connections and bring these kind of collections to life. So we do that through three main formats: blogs, exhibitions, and galleries. All of these are online. So blogs are short articles on a specific theme or topic, and generally kind of feature local heritage from across Europe. So some of the pictures here are some examples of Irish topics we've looked at in the past year. So we've published a blog about the work of the public art by female sculptors in Dublin, a blog about Michael McLeamore, a blog about the Cork LGBT archive, which was actually written by the archive holder themselves, and a blog about the Rathdown School in Dublin and their sport collections. Mostly these are written by Europeana, but also by organizations and cultural heritage professionals across Europe. So exhibitions are longer form articles with several chapters on topics that kind of resonate across Europe. So have something that every country or community can connect to in some way. So some examples here are some Irish examples featured in some of our recent exhibitions. Are the top picture is from the UCD Special Collections in Dublin and was featured in an exhibition called People on the Move, which is about how migration has influenced culture across Europe. The buildings below are from an exhibition called Heritage at Risk, which was about heritage being under threat in some ways, and this is the example here is the forecourts being destroyed. And the Barnbrack was featured in an exhibition called Celebrations in Europe, which was about different seasonal celebrations and traditions all across Europe, and an Irish example was Barnbrack. And then finally, galleries are curated sets of images and media from organizations across Dublin on specific themes. We haven't had too many of these that are specifically about Ireland, but we had one gallery about views of Dublin. I'm sorry to everywhere, that's not Dublin, but their Irish material features in a lot of these in different ways. We also, as an organization, put a lot of effort into education. So we have a part of our site that is dedicated for educators and features 400 plus different learning scenarios, which are available in English and some are in 6 other languages as well: French, Italian, Polish, Greek, Portuguese, and Spanish. There are co-creation tools and hundreds of different source collections and learning activities on a partner website we work with called Historiana. And just in March this year, we started a MOOC. I forgot what the name MOOC means, but it's an online course. And that's all aimed at educators and teachers how to use Europeana and embed this as a sort of a source for their work. So an important aspect of what we do as well is to think sort of seasonally and think of our work as campaigns. Instead of publishing editorial we do publish editorial on many different topics, but we try to sort of focus these into seasons and campaigns. These can vary in scope and duration, but they're designed to highlight and promote high quality content on Europeana, on our own website and on other sites too. We have different partnerships with organizations and such as a website called Daily Art and a number of others as well. So the idea here is that we are engaging audiences with heritage, highlighting the diversity of heritage in local, national and pan-European contexts, raising awareness of how heritage tells stories about communities, identities and other topics, and encouraging people to participate and take part online, sharing their personal memories and experiences. So a number of these topics that we have looked at over the past few years are women's history, about migration, about industrial heritage and working life, about Art Nouveau and Discovering Europe, which was tied to an initiative of the EU last summer where they wanted to encourage people to visit locally and inspire local tourism rather than international tourism. So we wrote a lot about different features and places across Europe. So I'll focus, I won't talk about all of these, but I'll focus on the 2 most recent. So each March we focus on women's history. Of course, we look at this throughout the year, but we give it a special focus in March. And we feature new editorial, new blogs, new galleries, at one point a whole exhibition, and look at stories from 4 centuries of women's history. Actually, this hasn't been updated since this March. We went way back to 1100, so more centuries. But we showcase different cultural heritage collections from institutions all across Europe and the world, and tell stories of women's history. This summer, we will be working on sport and highlighting the rich, fascinating collections of sporting heritage in a pan-European context and telling a story about Europe, but using sport as a kind of a lens to do that. And by doing that, we also look at different communities and their involvement in sport. The sport project, I think Catherine will speak about that as well. This has had a long route, so even though we talk about it being something that we're doing this summer, it's been really running for over a year at this point. We had planned to do it last summer, and then of course the pandemic came along and a lot of sport got pushed aside. So we thought it would be better to wait until sport was actually happening in the world again to really focus on this. But Catherine will talk about how we've been doing some work in Ireland, particularly around sport. So as I mentioned, an element of our work is about participation and encouraging people to get involved, and that happens in a number of different ways. Really for about over 10 years now, I think we've been organizing events that are called collection days. These are events where members of the public are invited to come to a museum or gallery or even sometimes a community center and share their memories on a specific topic. Our first topic of that was World War I, and we've had, I think, over 200 different collection day events around the World War I topic. There were some in Ireland. There was one in Wexford, I think, and one in Limerick and some in Dublin. We've also done collection day events on the topics of migration. So we held some in Limerick again and in Dublin. And actually there was one in Cork last 2019. On working life and industrial heritage, and we will do these about sport over the coming months. They may not be physical live events. It may be that they will be online, but it's surprising us how our partners who are working on these with us are actually being able to actually hold events. So we had some. There were actually there was an event last week in by our partners in Romania who didn't do it where they invited anyone to come at any one time, but they invited one person or two people at a time to come and share their stories and digitize their collection if it was old photographs or letters or trophies, that kind of thing. So we do this not just at these collection days, but also online. There is a form available from our website where anyone can share a memory related to any of the topics I spoke about. Particularly at the moment, we're interested in sports. So if any of you have old photographs or sporting memorabilia that tell a story that relates to sport in Waterford or elsewhere, we're more than happy to hear that. The website, I'll put, maybe later I can give you a list of links with all these specific links, but we invite people to share their stories and really excited to hear and to see those. We also have a site that's called Transcribathon. This is a website where material that has come into Europeana, often through some of these contribution projects, is transcribed. So if we have, let's say, a handwritten letter, a computer can't really read that handwritten letter, but a person can. And so they go to Transcribathon and can transcribe that letter. And it really helps then with the findability of that object. And obviously it makes it much more readable if it's been transcribed into typed text. The Transcribathon site also has a kind of a game element to it in that there's a race between teams. So it could be that Ireland is racing France, let's say, and it sort of adds to the fun of transcribing. Relatively new on the Europeana site is that anyone can now curate their own galleries. You can go through and choose, it can be anything you like. It could be just your favorite things you found there, or it could be something a bit more in depth or complex. It could be on a specific author or painter or anything you like, really. These can be kept private for yourself, or they can be made public so that others can look at it. But right now, nobody can find these because we haven't put a sort of a public interface onto this yet. But they're available, and we welcome if any of you would like to do that. And if you do make something and you'd like us to know about it, please send me an email because I'd love to know. We do a number of things also outside Europeana, outside our own website, and I'll just speak about two examples of those. So the first is a competition that we hold each year called GIF It Up. This is a competition that we run with a number of other organizations who are kind of Europeana, but in other continents. So the Digital Public Library of America, Trove, which is an Australian sort of version of Europeana. They might not like me describing them as such, but they are. Digital NZ is about is for New Zealand, and actually this year we also, or rather last year, we did this with Japan Search, which is a Japanese sort of site like Europeana. So in GIF It Up, we challenge people to reuse digital cultural heritage material that's openly licensed and to create and make GIF animations with those. So we get hundreds of entries each year, and they're always really inspiring and exciting. So this happens in October each year. So if you are interested in doing that, and perhaps we've had cases in the past where people have embedded this into their teaching, for example, to teach people how to make these. It will happen again this autumn. More soon, in May this year, we will do something called a Digital Storytelling Festival, which will be an online creative competition inviting cultural professionals and anyone else interested to create stories and be judged, and there'll be a prize at the end of that. I don't have all the details about this just right now, but keep an eye on our social media and a website in the run-up to May, and we'll have more information about that there. So on that, we can keep in touch. The Europeana's social media is there. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. My LinkedIn and my email is here. So if anyone has any questions, obviously feel free to do that, to email me and contact me. And I'm sure there'll be questions in the Q&A that I will get to later. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Adrian. That is a fascinating window into the ginormous resources that are available on Europeana. So hopefully when you have finished, everyone has finished attending the webinar here today, they have lots more that they can go and have a search through and see if they can find things. One of the things as an archivist that I often find is that it can be incredibly weird, the places where things can end up. And that's the great joy that is Europeana, is that it offers an opportunity for researchers to find unexpected things in incredibly unexpected places. And that's the benefit of Europeana. And now I noticed in the chat, there was a couple of technical questions about how to. So our next speaker is the person who is going to address some of that. Our next speaker is Dr. Kathryn Cassidy. She's a member of the technical team at the Digital Repository of Ireland. And she's responsible for developing the DRI's trustworthy digital repository infrastructure. And she's also the person who's leading the DRI's activities in relation to the Europeana national aggregator role that the DRI holds. And she has also been very much involved in archiving the social media and web-based material and archive on the 2018 referendum in Ireland. So she is well versed in the practicalities and the technical aspects of the digitisation of heritage. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Dr. Kathryn Cassidy to introduce us to that process of digitising our local heritage.
Thanks, Joanne. I hope everyone can hear me. My internet connection is very slow this morning. I've been having some problems with it, so hopefully there'll be no big technical hiccups as we go through this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the more practical steps that are involved in getting your content into Europeana. So I'll talk first about the different routes that there are available for you as an institution or also even an individual to get content into Europeana. And I'll talk about what the Digital Repository of Ireland's role is as a national aggregator and how we can help you with that. And then a little bit about preparing your collections. I won't go into too much detail because I could talk for hours about, how to prepare your collections, but we'll just touch upon that. So the way that what we call it is aggregation. That's the process of sending content to Europeana, and it's usually what happens is a data provider, which would be an institute, a cultural heritage institute, who has a collection. They don't send, as Killian said earlier, they don't send everything directly to Europeana. Europeana doesn't work with all of these different data providers. Instead, Europeana has this sort of, I suppose, a federated model where they work with the aggregators, and there are lots of different aggregator organizations, and then each aggregator works with multiple data providers. So DRI, the Digital Repository of Ireland, where I work, we are an aggregator for Europeana. And then one thing to note is that Europeana typically is not storing all of the data. It stores the metadata, that's the description, the title, subject, author, all of that descriptive metadata. That's the data about the data. So it doesn't typically store all of the data, but it links back to either a version of the file, the image file, or the 3D model or something that's on the aggregator site or that's on the data provider's site. So there are lots of different types of Europeana aggregator, and what I'm going to talk about mainly is national aggregators, because that's what the Digital Repository of Ireland is, but there's lots of different types. So if you have a collection, you have paths to get that into Europeana. You could go to kind of an international theme-based aggregator. There's domain aggregators and thematic aggregators that work in particular areas. So for example, there's an archaeology-based aggregator. There's different ones that take certain types of content, or there's one for manuscripts and things like that. Or if you have more varied collections and you don't want to have to go to different thematic aggregators for each of your different types of collections, then the more typical route would be to go to a national aggregator if your country has a national aggregator. So of course in Ireland we have a national aggregator as of 2019. We got confirmed as a certified Europeana national aggregator. So now that's a route that's available to anyone out there who has a collection and wants to get that into Europeana. To find the appropriate aggregator for your content, you can go to the Europeana website here, and the URL is down the bottom there. And there's a list basically of all the different aggregators, the domain and thematic ones, and then further down the page there's a list of all the national aggregators, so you can find information. And there's a little chat bot that'll come up and talk you through the choice, kind of to help you. It'll ask you a few questions and help you to select the most appropriate aggregator for your content. And then what I said earlier was that mostly you're going through an aggregator when you're depositing to Europeana, but as Adrian has already mentioned, there is this collection days, which is kind of Europeana reaching out directly to members of the public who have content. So you don't have to be an institute, a museum or a library or archive in order to get your content or your photographs and things into Europeana. If you have content that fits in with one of these collection campaigns that Adrian has mentioned, you can go directly to the Europeana website, and they'll have a page there for you to submit your stories. And there's a little form you can fill in the details. So you fill in the title, a description, what is this picture, or this, what's the data showing or depicting, and you fill in maybe your details as the creator and various different bits of information around that, and some search keywords that people can use to find your data. And then you upload your file and it'll go through to Europeana. So in this case, Europeana will store the file that you're uploading. So they'll store your image for you. But if you're going through an aggregator, typically they're just linking out. They store a thumbnail, little small image, but they're typically linking out to the content on your website, if you have content on your website, or in the case of the Digital Repository of Ireland, you deposit your files into the DRI, and then it can link to the DRI version of the files or your own institute's website. And as Killian's coming up next, that was Adrian. So as Adrian mentioned, we were involved in a Europeana Sport Ireland Stories campaign over the summer. And I know that URL down the bottom, it's a bit horrible there, but it is. There are various different. I think Killian has shared a better link to that in the chat, where you'll be able to find this information. So this is a collection. I can't remember. I think we had maybe 50 or 60 stories submitted over the course of the summer and into autumn, from members of the public. And we were co-coordinating this with, so it was the DRI, it was the Hunt Museum, and various different organizations. I've forgotten all the list of all the organizations who were involved. But what we did was we publicized it via our own channels, and reached out to members of the public, asking them to please submit stories and images and things that they had about sport in Ireland. And we got some really interesting stories there. We have stories about the early days of surfing in Ireland, and we have stories about some very niche sports like fencing and martial arts and things like that, as well as GAA, hockey, and the bigger, more popular sports. So it's really nice to get those stories coming from members of the public, and it ranges from really quite historical content, very old photographs, to quite much more modern photographs. So then, to talk a little bit more about what the Digital Repository of Ireland does, we are a national digital repository for Ireland science, and we offer long-term preservation and access services. So when you deposit your content with the DRI, we will keep it, we'll make it available to users, and we'll endeavor to continue to make sure that it remains accessible to users. So that might mean look at the format of the data and checking that it's, is this file format still easily openable in lots of different software. We will continue the have easy for people to access it in the future. And we're also the certified Europeana national aggregator for Ireland. So the structure of DRI is that we are a consortium of 3 research institutions in Ireland. It's the Royal Irish Academy, Trinity College Dublin, and Maynooth University. And we're a membership-based, primarily information how you can join. And there is usually a fee for joining, but there are some as well if you really have the money. Question earlier in the chat from Darina O'Byrne about how kind of a small voluntary organization can get their content digitized and into a site like Europeana. Well, the DRI does run an archive scheme. Now it's primed at who already have digitized content, but it provides free membership for voluntary or non-profit or low-income organizations. And these are some of the winners that have won the award in previous years. Free membership, training, support, various different types of support to help them to prepare their collections. We don't offer funding for digitization, but the Department of Culture, I was going to say Culture and Heritage, but they've changed the names of the department, remember? So it's the Department of Culture and all those whatever periodics to get. So if you're a small organization, you're not, or somebody who has the funds for this or has staff, permanent staff, there are still ways that you can get your content into the Digital Repository of Ireland, and from there into Europeana. Repository of Ireland looks like, and it brings together all these collections. This is just a sample of a few collections that we have on the moment. I'm gonna mention a few that are Waterford specific, just to show you some of the interesting content there. And these ones are all things that are going to end up in Europeana eventually, or are already aggregated to European process of being aggregated at the moment. So this is the Teresa Deevy archive, the physics held, and of course Teresa Deevy, as Waterford citizens, you're probably all very aware of who Teresa Deevy is, a famous playwright. That's one collection that we have, and I think that's not yet in Europeana, but we're hoping to get that one in quite soon. This is one of Magdalene Oral History Collection, which is a series. It's actually a social sciences research project that interviewed, I suppose, survivors of Magdalene laundries or people who'd been in Magdalene laundries, but also local residents near the Magdalene laundries about how what their views and their perceptions of the Magdalene laundries and of the women who were there. And this woman who was in interviews with lots of different people across Ireland. So it's quite an interesting collection. And this is from the Clark Stained Glass Studios collection. And this is a collection that, again, the paper version of this is stored in Trinity College Dublin in the library. And this is an image from a church, Mount Sion Church in Waterford. And this is the Fáilte Ireland Tourism Photographic Collection, which is from the Dublin City Library and Archives collections. They have the physical content for that, and they've digitized those. And it's a lot of images, Fáilte Ireland, so tourist images from around Ireland. This is just one from Waterford. Waterford, but there's lots and lots of the region and also from all over Ireland. And again, as I said, most of these are being aggregated to Europeana at the moment. So then I'm just going to very briefly talk about the step collection where you deposit it into Europeana. So you need to have a certain amount of data. associated with the collection. You need to have title, description, keywords, authors, dates, subjects, the locations, things like that. So the more information you can give to describe the content, the better. And then you also want to structure that in a particular way. So the way it's structured when it's sent to Europeana, it looks a bit like this. This is called the Europeana Data Model, EDM. And it's a bit horrible looking, obviously, but if you take a look, it has a link here, maybe to the image in this case, down the bottom there, and at the top it has, this is quite a short description. Typically you'd actually have more detail than that, but this is just telling you the title, a description, and a few different fields there, giving you some information. But obviously we're not expecting, in Europeana, don't expect every to create this, because it's quite technical. But for putting stuff into DRI, we have an easy kind of ingest form that you can use to fill in those fields, and then you upload your as well. We also have a way, if you have your metadata prepared in a spreadsheet format, we can help ingest that directly from the spreadsheet, and that will hopefully make it easier. We also have a lot of publications and guidelines to help you, give you guidance about how to create your metadata and best practice in creating metadata. And those publications page, you can download those. We have fact sheets on things like copyright and licensing. And again, Adrian has already mentioned the importance of having clear licensing information and reuse information, so that we've available on that. And we've training, which is aimed at our member organizations, but typically what we do is there's a certain number of reserved places for members, but there's also non-member organizations can also join our training, and that can be, it covers a range of topics around preparing collections for ingest or for Europeana. So if you have not previously worked with the DRI, please feel free to go to our website and you can sign up for our mailing list and get information about training that's upcoming. So I think that's all I was going to say. Thank you very much. And I'll pass back to Joanne. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Catherine. So that kind of gives people a picture of just how both as individuals and as organizations, there are so many opportunities to contribute to Europeana. Just to let you know, there is an opportunity after this session to join a kind of organizations kind of professionals networking event, and if you haven't got a connection for that already, you can email me at jrothwell@waterfordcouncil.ie. I put that into the chat, and that will give people who are looking to do an ingest with Europeana to maybe join our experts for a much more kind of technical question kind of process. But getting back to the slightly long, to the kind of a further exploration of Europeana, where our next speaker is Killian Downing. He's an archivist at Dublin City University. He has an incredibly extensive experience with digital preservation, collection management, and digital cultural heritage. He has previously worked with the National Archives, with the National Gallery, and with the National University of Galway. And he is also working with Europeana. He is the chair of the New Professionals Task Force, and he's there working to support new and early career professionals working in and around Europeana, and is also the co-chair of the Europeana Communicators Community and a member of the Climate Action Group, the Governance Working Group, and the Inclusivity and Diversity Group. So he is the perfect person to tell us a little bit more about how organisations can get involved with Europeana and some of the amazing benefits to that.
Thanks so much, Joanne. Absolutely, I think that just shows you, though, getting involved in Europeana and the Network Association specifically is what I'm going to talk about. And only a couple of years ago, I joined up and I got involved. And there's just so much that you can do to kind of get involved in everything that's going on with Europeana, and it's a really exciting kind of initiative and kind of community to be part of. So can everyone see that okay? I think that looks fine. Thanks again, Joanne, and my name is Killian, and I'm a archivist in Dublin City University Library, and I'm also a voluntary counsellor with Europeana, and I'll explain what that means just in a second. So this is a nice coloured lithograph. I was looking at the collections on Europeana, and there's a huge amount of images and kind of depictions and representations of the tower here in Waterford down through the years, through photographs and prints and paintings. So being an archivist, I'm kind of all about the context, and I wanted to just play a short segment from Sean Whelan.
There are many great collections of artworks, books, moving images and audio recordings all across Europe, but getting to visit them is a time-consuming and expensive business. But now there's a new web portal that aims to bring all the cultural treasures and glories of Europe's museums and libraries to a computer near you. Europeana.eu is the name of the portal, which links together museum and library sites across Europe, providing a single entry point into the ever-growing digital collections of European cultural artefacts. Close to 3 million items are available to the public through the portal now, during its initial phase. In 2 years' time, when it's fully operational, it'll have around 10 million items, all available for download and use by the public on anything from personal blogs to teaching aids in schools.
Sugar now. I've cut that out, so I will go back into this here. Share again. So next slide. Now, apologies. So as Adrian and Catherine were explaining, there is so much that kind of is part of the whole Europeana initiative. There's the aggregating side of it. There's the foundation itself, who manage so much of the kind of thriving activity that goes on in Europeana. But there's also the network, and the network is such a fundamental part of Europeana, because it is about the people, and it's about the kind of expertise and the passion and the kind of enthusiasm that comes into play when we share and kind of connect so much cultural heritage from around Europe and from around the world. So as part of the network, the network is a kind of an open, free to join community, and I'll share the link after this. And it's about 3,200 individuals who range from teachers to educators to cultural heritage professionals to students to kind of creative professionals. And each of them, when you join up, you're free to join task force, communities, working groups to kind of help shape the strategic kind of direction of Europeana, and kind of consider how it can be more relevant to all the different audiences out there. So the six specialized communities are the communicators, impact, education, and copyright, tech and research there, as you can see. And as part of being a member, whatever you can give to the network is completely fine. And we're kind of setting up a kind of a membership working group now, especially to kind of show new members to the Network Association how they can get involved and how they can kind of share their stories, or their kind of learning needs, or their perspective about maybe their kind of local heritage that they want to kind of be part of the jigsaw of Europeana. And as part of being a member of the Network Association, there is a kind of an annual conference where there's kind of an open call for proposals, where any number of kind of individuals can submit maybe a presentation that they want to talk about. And I know last year 70% of the conference program was from that open call of proposals, and it was all about digital transformation, climate change, and kind of inclusivity. So very much the European initiative is kind of an open door to everyone's kind of perspectives and kind of nuance of where people will be coming from and wanting to use Europeana. So my own experience working with Europeana came from sharing a story back in I think it was 2013. And as Adrian was saying, there is a World War One kind of subset of Europeana, which is looking to kind of collect cultural heritage around the First World War. And this Dead Man's Plenty, our World War I memorial plaque, was in the possession of my family for decades upon decades. My grandfather, Tom Murphy in Limerick, dug it up in, I think, the 1950s near Clancy Strand. And the family just didn't know who this man, Thomas McGarry, was. And for a number of years, it kind of remained just a kind of in my kind of family's possession until we shared it. I did a little bit of research and I put it up on Europeana, and that was kind of 2013. And I had looked at some of the fragmentary records about Thomas McGarry, but I couldn't find any association that he had with Limerick, because he was unfortunately lost on the Laurentic ship in 1917 when it hit two mines off the Irish coast up in Lough Swilly. And he died on board on the ship, and there was a huge number of sailors and kind of merchant seamen who were drowned. Descendants of Thomas McGarry, as far away as Australia, spotted the World War I memorial plaque online, and were able to then contact Europeana and contact me to say that Thomas McGarry basically had a wife called Delia in Limerick at the time, but who had since moved. And we were able to kind of fill in the gaps of the story and kind of make connections with his kind of descendants in Australia and in the UK, and some who were still in Ireland. And through the story, we were able to kind of return the Dead Man's Penny, or the World War I memorial plaque, to the family of McGarry, which is like a really important a really important moment for them, because this was a kind of a tangible artifact of their grandfather, where there was no body and there was no grave. And I suppose this really shows you the kind of the potential of Europeana, about connecting people all across the world by kind of sharing stories and then connecting kind of memories and perspectives and experiences with that. So I got involved with the Network Association, I think, after that, and that's just some kind of stories about how we returned it. And poor Delia McGarry, who I found out from her children, dressed in black ever since that sinking in 1917, and her son Thomas McGarry Jr., who's just on the bottom right hand corner there, actually served on a minesweeper during the Second World War and was torpedoed, but survived the sinking. So there's so many stories that can come out of stories, and I'm sure with all the attendees here, there's probably stories coming out of this that kind of connect with that. So really, a way in which being involved in the Network Association is by kind of sharing kind of expertise and knowledge, but also these perspectives of maybe aspects of digital cultural heritage which are more marginalized than others. And really, if Europeana does anything, that's so kind of valuable, it's kind of the democratization of digital cultural heritage, and kind of opening up stories, not just in countries, but all around the world. And these are a few examples of the sports stories that Kathryn had kind of talked about there. And this is very much a kind of an active online collection campaign, where we have been looking to acquire and promote stories about kind of sporting triumphs, memories, and just experiences. And one of which is from Fergal Smith, with his daughter there, Sunshine, who was a very famous professional surfer, but didn't really like the lifestyle that went with it, because you were traveling kind of around the world, going from one continent to the next, looking for big wave surfing. So one of the contributions that we received for the Europeana Sports Ireland Stories campaign was Fergal via an interview, where he talks about his experience of kind of moving back from surfing to farming, and he's very much a champion of kind of community supported agriculture and the whole idea of regenerative farming. And so I can just play a little snippet of this here. I think this should work.
So yeah, my route to surfing was I grew up in Mayo, near Westport, and growing up on an organic farm, we're fairly busy. But my mum kind of put her foot down and said, we're going to take the weekends off. And we used to go to Ackle Island.
And so you can see from a sports campaign, you also get kind of other aspects of kind of the land and life, and that are all brought into these kind of experiences. And this is what's the most kind of fascinating thing, in that kind of Europeana is such a kind of Pandora's box of knowledge and stories. And I was looking kind of just last night of some of the UCD National Folklore collection of students who wrote about the places that they were from, and this kind of connection with their locality or with their townland. And this is from 1937. It's an unnamed child. I don't think it was recorded, and this is has been aggregated to Europeana. But it also talks about the same way that Fergal talks about the need for kind of small farms to kind of open up in Ireland. And this goes back to 1937 and talks about maybe the crops which were available at the time. And there's so many kind of aspects like this where you have kind of fragmentary knowledge that you can, using Europeana, you can bring it all together and make connections and make kind of new research avenues, and also use this kind of with school children to make them maybe think about people who lived in their city or their town before them, and what their life was like. And really that kind of strikes a real kind of connection with kind of the development of towns in Ireland and all the kind of aspects that are kind of associated around that. So I will share a link to this just in the chat here. So I would very much like recommend anyone just to join up, which is completely free, and you will receive kind of emails now and again, maybe every kind of month, about activities that are going on in Europeana and how you can get involved. And you can have a look at that website there. And I'd have to say it's for whatever kind of walk of life that you come from, this is a kind of a very open, friendly community where there's so much going on. It's kind of just very kind of vibrant and active. So I'd very much welcome you to join the Network Association and kind of be involved in Europeana. So I think I'll stop it there. So thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Killian. So as everyone has seen, I hope from this morning's talks from all of our really brilliant speakers, there is so much potential with Europeana, and there's so many fabulous opportunities for organisations and also individuals to participate in Europeana and share some of the amazing cultural heritage that we have here in Ireland. So I want to thank each of our speakers, Adrian, Kathryn and Killian, for opening up such a fantastic avenue of research resources for us today, and for explaining how we can get involved ourselves. I want to thank all of our attendees for coming. I hope you all enjoyed it. And I also want to thank Sinead O'Higgins, who is the fabulous or project leader for for Europe Direct in Waterford Libraries, and is the brilliant person who does so many amazing events. So I just want to thank Sinead, and also Blahin, who's doing our technical backup here today. If you take a look in the chat, you'll see that I've put in the link to the Zoom follow-up to this event here. So this is an opportunity for anybody who is thinking of joining the Europeana network to come along and ask maybe some more technical questions. So I think if if anyone does want to join that, if you take a look at the chat, you'll see the link there now. So I just want to say once more, thank you all so much for joining us, and I hope that you found it useful. And more importantly, I hope that you go back and do some exploring across Europeana and take the opportunity that it presents to kind of find something really fascinating and interesting today. Thank you all so much for your attention. We really do appreciate it. And I'm actually hopefully might see some of you in our further technical Zoom call that will be starting shortly. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks so much, Joanne, Sinead and Blahin. That's brilliant.
You're very welcome. I'm going to end this now, and we'll see you all in the other Zoom chat in a minute or two. Thank you.